Hey everybody, welcome back to Something to Complain About. This is A. I'm here with T. T, how you doing this week?
I'm doing all right, A. How are you?
Good. I am good. It's a very strange week here. We went from being cold as crap to being 80 some today. So, you know,
Oh, you've been having the same weather that we had last week. It actually was looking and feeling like fall, and uh, past few days it feels almost like summer out there, and it's
it
just
does.
miserable. It's just miserable.
As we get old, I mean, I know we talked about this in one of the last episodes when we were really talking about like our medical fun and our birthday procedures and stuff like that. But this is the time of year when it doesn't decide what it wants to do, that it wreaks havoc on me specifically, like allergy wise. So I like to have the windows open when it's nice out, but I pay for it for days. So we're
Oh,
just kind of
yeah.
need it to decide, is it going to be cold or is it going to be warm? Because
Well,
I mean, it's late enough in the year. We should not be having, it should not be 82 degrees, 80, whatever today. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
it seems like we have the daily conversation at my house of do we open the windows or not?
No.
And I generally say no because this weather, it kills my allergies and that it just makes my asthma just go
Yeah.
haywire. And and it's been so dry here that it's like I don't want all that wind blowing in even just more dust and crud than what
Yeah.
we're bringing in already. So yeah, I'm ready for the some cold and some solid cold. My allergies are ready for that, and so is the asthma. And my little dogs too. They this time of year they get their allergies going, and in spring we'll be here soon enough, and we go through the same thing again.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Yeah,
It's a super good time.
it's always a good time.
It is.
Always.
This feels though like it should be vacation weather.
It does. It really does. Yeah, because I have been having some wanderlust
Yeah.
lately. And I think, yeah, because it is that, I don't know, like the last little bit of summer or something, hurry up, pack up a bag and go somewhere for a long weekend or
Well, that's the weird part,
walk.
right? Like the last little bit of summer is usually right around the time school starts for people, except
Yeah.
school has been in session now for a bit. So this is
Yeah, like
very
2 months.
late,
Yeah.
weird summer. Like this is sort of somebody told me this a while back. Actually, it was probably back in August. We had a really warm week, 90-ish, about or upper 90s or whatever. And then we had a very nice week where it was like 70s. And I was kind of excited about that. And the dude was like, "This is Chicago. We still have second and third summer to go. What are you talking about?" And sure enough, the next week it was back to being almost 100. And then we
And
had, so that was second summer for a couple of weeks. And now we've had a week where it actually got into like the 30s overnight. And it was barely 50 during the day. I was like, okay, I guess we're getting into fall. And now it's 80 again, and it's going to be 80 tomorrow and 80 the day after and 80 the day after that. And then it's going to start to go back. So it's like, okay, we're kind of now inching out, hopefully, a third summer here in Chicago, which means maybe we get fall finally. Uh,
maybe, or like here in Omaha anymore, we get like maybe a week, 10 days of true fall. And then we're going to be ice skating and we're digging out
with there.
snow and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fun.
But
Did you have any, like, when you were growing up, were there specific sort of end of the summer things you did? Like, did you have special vacations you guys took or?
we actually, um, the timing of vacations kind of varied. Like, I remember in 1984, we went to Denver to see my aunt and uncle and my two cousins in Denver in June. about the time that my cousin D, he was turning 1. But I think we went that early that year because we went out to Denver with another aunt and 2 more cousins. And they were getting ready to leave for Germany, like in August.
Yep.
So, but I remember most of the time it felt like we would get in the car and try to do like a long, either like a longer weekend or a short week to
Yeah.
Denver, like in August, right before school or late July. Yeah. And we always went out to Denver because I had an aunt, they still are there, have an aunt and uncle who live out there. So, and it was like an 8-hour drive from our house. So my mom could easily drive it in a day. And then we stayed with my aunt and uncle. And
Yeah.
that's why I've been to Colorado like 15 times
It's
before,
kind
before I was 18. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this is a fairly common experience for those of us who, okay, I can't believe I'm going to say it this way, but like we grew up right in the last century. So
Yes.
like we did the same thing. We didn't go to Denver as often. We went to Denver a couple times because my mom had a cousin there
Hmm.
also outside of Denver. So we did that a few times. But like it was pretty common for us if we were going to go somewhere because I mean, we very rarely did big vacations.
Yes.
Maybe once every 2 years we go. And every time we did one, whatever it was always with other family members. And like we were all sharing a cabin or something, right? So
Hmm.
the whole point was how do we do this on a budget, for lack of a better word, right? Like our parents were trying to be as money conscious as possible. Um, but we would usually at the end of the summer, if my memory is correct, and I don't know, my brother might disagree with me, but this is all I remember. We'd usually take one last trip out to see my grandparents who lived way out in Western North Dakota. It was a 6-hour drive from where we grew up.
Hmm.
And we'd just go spend, a long weekend or a full week out there with them so that we could see my aunts and my uncles and cousins and ride horse for a little bit or do whatever. Because we knew we weren't coming back until maybe Christmas because it was such a long drive. Mm. So that was basically it. If we actually took a family vacation, it was usually early July because the place that my dad worked would shut down over for like 2 weeks around the 4th of July and like retool the entire plant. And so they would just have this vacation built in for everybody for those 2 weeks. And then only certain people had to come to work because they were like they were retooling or whatever they were doing. So
Hmm.
that was usually when we planned it because he wouldn't miss any work and he wouldn't have to burn any vacation time, right? So you could save that vacation. So it was always this sort of strategery, right? Around how do we go have some kind of fun on, on a fairly, I mean, back
You,
then it seemed like we had, like we weren't really like, we were poor, but we we were very careful about what we spent basically. So we
you do
didn't get on
make
a plane and go anywhere.
You do make a good point because I think like we went to Denver when I was 6, 7, 10, 14, and then 18. So we didn't go every year. But we often would, and like my poor mother, like we're gonna go on vacation and we would go to Topeka for the weekend to spend time with one of her cousins, or we'd go to little Grand Island, Nebraska for the weekend to see one of her friends, But again, it was something different and something fun. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, as we got older, I mean, like, what did you do on vacation? Well, I went to Grand Island for the week, but Mom always made it fun and made it such a huge deal that we were getting out of town and we were going somewhere and we were gonna have fun and even if it was like when we were going to Grand Island, Even if it was, oh, now we get to swim in this river that we've never been in before, and then we're all like, yeah. So yeah, definitely the low key vacations. Plus, we always had a fun time visiting my mom's friend in Grand Island because her friend had a dog.
Oh,
And
that was exciting.
so yeah, lady, and she was a, oh, what was Lassie? A collie.
Border collie? Yeah.
No, just a regular collie.
Oh,
Just a big old collie. And I remember, just having fun playing with Lady and walking her around and not picking up her poop when I walked her because it was gross. And, um,
I haven't thought of Lassie in I don't even know how many decades. For
but
those of you who don't know what we're talking
that's,
about, you should Google it. I mean, anybody who's Gen X will probably remember it. Boomers will definitely remember it.
Troya.
It was still black and white, right?
Yeah, it was because it was like the reruns played. Yeah, when we were kids. But I I especially remember 1984 because for whatever reason, my parents both decided, and they were divorced at this time, that they were going to take us on the ultimate family vacation. Yeah. Mind you, I was 7.5. My brother was 5.5, and my sister was 4.5. So, like, yeah, let's make memories because my brother vaguely remembers these vacations and my sister doesn't at all because she was 4. But so anyway, my parents had, I guess, when they were married, had planned this huge family vacation where they would drive us across country. We would go to Oregon and see the ocean. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, I just turned 48. I've never been to Oregon.
Okay.
Okay. So that
It's
tells you how that
beautiful.
works out. I've heard it's very beautiful. And as a matter of fact, if it weren't for you, I would have never seen the Pacific Ocean. So,
Well, I just made it to Oregon a year ago, right? So I was 47 when I got to Oregon. No, I was 46 when I got to Oregon for the first time. And my friend and I that I met in Portland drove out to the ocean. It was
oh, no.
great. It was beautiful. It was lovely.
Well,
We did what 1984 must have been the year for that kind of thing because I I actually remember this will sound
I,
painful, but my parents decided to take so my grandfather, right, my mom's dad, had sisters who married men who lived in rural Washington. And so my mom also had a cousin in is it Renton? One of the suburbs of Seattle or one of the parts of Seattle.
oh, okay.
Um, and so the plan was to drive with my grandparent all the way from North Dakota, all the way out to Washington. And my
I'm,
brother and I were the same age, right? I think my brother's the same age as your brother. It's just 3 years younger than me. Is that about right?
no, my brother's 2 years younger than me.
Okay, so he's a little bit older.
He's the same age as my sister. Your brother is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine a 4-year-old or a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old in like
Oh,
with my grandparents and my parents in a 1976 Chevy Impala?
okay. Nope, I have you beat because this is what we rode in. We had my mom, my Aunt Dee. I was 7.5. My cousin Jay had just turned 7. My brother was 5.5. My sister was 4.5. And my cousin Kay was 4.5. And we got into a big old Gran Torino,
Oh my.
1976 Gran Torino.
This gives
And
new meaning to last century vacations. We're just
was
a step
depressing
ahead of
as
a horse and buggy.
was depressing because that car was only 8 years old. we, I think this all was the National Lampoon's Vacation Effect because that movie came out in '83 and it was a huge
Oh,
hit.
probably.
And I think all of the boomers were like, yes, we want to take a miserable family vacation with our children. So in 1984, in June, my mother and my aunt piled us all into the car and drove 8 hours to Denver. And then in July, my dad piled us all into the car and took us to South Dakota. So that was like, I thought that was pretty cool because at that point in time, I'm 7.5. I'm like, awesome. I'm going to get 2 vacations a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I remember 1984 is because that's the only time that ever happened.
Yeah.
So
You thought it was precedent setting and it was
I
not.
I did. I did. And and of course, both my parents would always talk about this huge trip that we're going to take out to Oregon. Now my only hope is little T is from Oregon. So I hope when she gets married, she decides she gets married in her hometown. So I have an excuse to go to Oregon now. But anyway, so I digress. So my mom and one of her sisters, they head out to Denver. And oh God, I got to tell you this. Hey, you've been to Denver. Have you been to Red Rocks? Oh, you should go. They have concerts there. It's an outdoor amphitheater, super famous. So it was such an eventful trip. And that was a very eventful day because my cousin Kay puked in the car on the way up to Red Rocks. Even so, my aunt
Oh, good times.
had to change her clothes on the side of the road. And we get up to Red Rocks, and I was thinking about this the other night. And I remember, here's my mom, and she's like right at 30. My aunt is in her early 30s. And between the two of them, they have 5 kids under the age of 7. And I remember like the security guards were like, what are you guys doing up here? And just they were looked at really oddly. And the only thing I remember about Red Rocks on that trip was being told to look at the ground and not look around me because there was a festival in progress and apparently all kinds of things were going down. So I thought the other night, I'm like, well, what concerts were going on around that time that what did we stumble into? Because I saw all kinds of things I had never seen before and I've lived a lot of lives since.
Right.
I Googled it. Are you ready for this? Carolyn
I
and
think so.
Dorothy took us to a Frugal Dead concert.
Holy cow. I'm guessing intentionally, which is why they told you not to look around. That sounds like something your mom would do.
Which explains why when I did look around, I saw all the kinds of things I had never saw before or since. So, yeah. So
That's fun, though. That's a good memory.
It is. But, and for years, I was like, well, what concert was that? And Mom would never tell me. Now I know why.
Right.
Because she would have never been able to live it down. And so finally I was like, oh, yeah, well, Google exists. So let me just Google it and I'll settle the mystery once and for all. So.
And you just Googled this recently.
Yeah, I just Googled it like in the past 2 weeks or so. As a matter of fact, I still have the tab open.
Nice.
But yeah, so like they took us in the middle of a 3-day Grateful Dead.
Why not?
Yeah.
They had a good time.
I mean,
this is probably why you have such an eclectic music. Your experience with music is very last century world.
No, I don't know what they were thinking. I really don't.
I mean, let's just be grateful they took you. I mean, I think it's probably good.
now I wish I could remember more. I just
I'm
remember,
sure you do.
I mean, I just, I just remember people just like bodies just lying around everywhere
You know
and
what's
lots of
occurring to me.
smoke, a
Well,
lot
I
of
would
smoke.
imagine. Well, why
Yeah.
not?
I mean, like a
I
lot of,
mean, smoke of that's what I mean. Like, of course. Of course.
they haven't think
But
about
it's
it,
kind
what
of
calms down.
this is off topic a little bit, the kind of still pertinent, but it's interesting because as we keep doing these episodes, and this is just between you and me, and I'm sure our listeners will find this somewhat interesting. It's almost like we've known each other for a while, like
Oh,
what,
you?
1998. So it's not like we're strangers, but we keep learning new things, I think,
Yeah.
about each other.
About each other.
And part of
Yeah.
it's also because we're learning things, we're figuring out and remembering things about our own past that we hadn't probably thought about in decades or needed to think about or talk about. So that's just like, it's the first time I've heard this story that or that C took you to a Grateful Dead concert. And I'm just going to be honest, not surprised in the slightest,
Well,
having met your mom, right? Like, good for her.
I just don't like, I wish mom were still around where I could, first of all, confront her with the, like, mom, that was the
Yeah,
Grateful
fun
Dead.
conversation.
And,
So, what were you
and
guys
like,
thinking?
there were multiple steps that were taken and multiple decisions made that still ended up with us in the middle of the Grateful Dead concert. Because I was like, surely my aunt N, who lives in Denver, would have been like, hey, C and D, don't take the kids up to Red Rocks because there's a concert going on. And because my uncle, who lives in Denver, certainly knew the Grateful Dead. So, I mean, like,
Sure.
it wasn't like this
Not a surprise.
mysterious, you know. So, I mean, the choices were made. And like,
Yes.
they made the,
They
you know,
made good choices. I'm not judging them.
I am. You
I know you, I know you are, but like, why not? Right? I mean, they
I,
could have been taking you to church camp or something, and they took you to Grateful Dead. I think, I think you got the better end of the deal. Now,
it,
maybe our listeners will disagree with me, but like, I think it's, I think you got the better end of the deal. Like, you could have been at Jesus camp, and instead you were at Grateful Dead. So I'm a
probably
little
get,
jealous.
probably get in contact.
Perfect. Perfect. Why not? It's all good. I mean, it's funny though, because you think about vacations, and the thing that pops into my head is when I see families today taking vacation, this century's vacations are so much different,
They
right? They're
are.
getting on airplanes, they're going to Disney World, they're going to Europe, and
Well,
maybe that's a little bit about who I guess we might know more now. But
but
even who I grew up with, when they go on vacations, they're going somewhere else. Like, they're not
mhm.
necessarily going to family. And that was definitely, I wasn't on an airplane for the first time until I was, I think I was a senior in high school, or maybe a
Ooh,
end of my junior year in high school. I can't remember.
I
And
was a sophomore. Yep,
I
I was a
literally got on an
sophomore in high
airplane to
school.
look at colleges. Like, it wasn't like I was going on vacation. I went to spend a week with my mom's cousin, right, in Texas, and they took me to a bunch of colleges, and then I flew home. So it wasn't like I was on I mean, it felt like a vacation, but it wasn't totally a vacation. But like, we would pile into, for the first couple, like for a long time, we had these little 4-door, right, little, we had this little tiny Buick, and then we had this little tiny Pontiac or whatever, and you could barely fit us in there with all the stuff we needed to take on a vacation, right? Like, that was what we had to do. And at some point we got a
Mhm.
minivan because that's what everybody else was doing, and we needed the space as we got older. I cannot remember a single vacation that we took that did not involve family.
Yeah, I can't either because even with my dad taking us to South Dakota, It was to see my step monster's mother.
Yeah.
So even that was wrapped up, and we stayed at her place. And, and the thing I remember the most about that trip, and this is so terrible, but my dad drove us through Pine Ridge,
Yeah.
and my step monster got out of the car. Actually, there was a lot of trauma on that trip. But my step monster got out of the car like at a gas station, and my dad starts driving off, and he told us that he used the word Indian. He goes, the Indians are going to scalp Kay.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I started like screaming and crying because even though I didn't like my step monster, I didn't want her scalped. And my only frame of reference were those old Westerns.
Right.
You know, like old
Bonanza, Gunsmoke,
John Wayne
John Wayne.
and
Yeah.
Gunsmoke and the old Clint Eastwood and stuff. So I remember just like screaming because, these men on horses were going to come up to the highway and scout my step monster right on the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also the same trip. And I think the same day, possibly even the same hour, because this happened in the Sand Hills too, where my dad raced a train and stopped on the tracks while a train was coming towards us.
Oh. Oh
Yeah.
my.
Yeah.
Never had that experience.
I would not, 0 to 10 would not recommend
You
that.
would not recommend.
I would not. I remember when I told my husband about it, because we spent the weekend out in the Sandhills several years ago for our wedding anniversary. And I told my husband about that. And like my husband's going like 65 on the highway, and he literally turns his head, jaw dropped. And because I just sit there and I'm just like innocently saying, oh, yeah, this is about where dad. And he's like, what? And my response was, what? Your dad didn't do that? Hey.
No.
What the fuck?
That's the appropriate response.
Like, no, my father never did that. I'm like, oh, maybe my childhood was a little more screwed up than I thought it had been. But
It's awesome.
totally. But it was, yeah, that was a fun summer because when my aunts got married and we went to Denver and we went to South Dakota. And I was really into the presidents at that age. So seeing like Mount Rushmore
Yeah.
was really quite something to see. Yeah.
I mean, I think that was probably normal in the sense that vacations for our generation, because of, I mean, I think if we think back to the economic situation back then, right?
Right.
Things were definitely not booming. So most of us probably had situations where our vacations as kids were as innovative as our parents could make them in a way that was, as frugal as possible, right? So we were sharing we didn't stay in hotels very often because it was always like, can we get somewhere where we know somebody? Even when we went all the way out to Washington State that year, we stopped at my dad's sister in Western North Dakota and stayed overnight with her. And then we stayed somewhere in Montana with my dad's parents had fostered 4 children in addition to the 6 children of their own that they had, right? They had fostered 4 kids. And one of the girls lived in somewhere in Montana. I don't remember anymore. I just remember we went there, we stayed there. She took us to this amazing candy store, and I still remember the candy store. I don't remember where in Montana it was, but like I remember the candy store and being so excited about the candy store and wanting to go back and see Aunt Mabel again. And I've never seen her since, right? That was 1984. I don't think I've ever seen her since. Oh no, I saw her when my dad's dad passed away. She came for the funeral, and that was the last time I saw her. But like we stopped there and then we made it all the way across the rest of Montana into Idaho and into west or eastern Washington. And we
Mhm.
got to my grandfather's sister's place, right? So we stayed there. There were no hotels on that entire trip because it was always they mapped it out to stay with family so
Mhm.
that I mean, and it worked because we would do the same thing for family. If they were coming through, they'd spend the night. We would feed them. They would feed us. Like nobody expected you to bring food. You just, it helped everybody save money and still be able to do stuff. And so we literally were out in Washington State a few months after. Do you remember when the volcano blew
Well,
and
yes.
Mount St. Helens blew?
Yeah.
Um, we were there a year or so, maybe 2 years later, and it felt like it had just happened because there was still, when we got there, I still remember asking, why is there snow in the ditch? Because it was summer
And it was
and
ash.
it was ash. There was still ash
Mm.
in the ditch. And like what would they be? My grandfather's sister would be like, would that be my great aunt?
Yes.
Um, my great aunt and great uncle the great uncle I just remember him sitting there outside on the farm. They had apple orchards. It was fantastic. And he was explaining all of that, like those ash that's been there for almost 2 years. It slowly goes away as it rains. They don't want us to move it because you don't want to breathe it in if you can help it. Like, don't go play in
Mhm.
it, right? That kind of stuff. And they were telling us like how they experienced because they were not close, right? They were really Eastern Washington, closer to Spokane. They were a long way from Mount St. Helens, but he talked about how it was dark for a while and it didn't matter. You couldn't see the sun for a day or whatever the heck it was, and very
Oh,
disorienting,
jeez.
and had to like try to get all the animals inside and keep them safe in whatever they were doing. But I remember driving in thinking it's July. Why is there snow? It looked like snow, like packed snow in the ditches, like from where we had grown up. And we
That
stayed there for a bit, and then we went to Seattle, and we stayed with my mom's cousin in Seattle, and like there were no hotels. We just everywhere we went, there was family to stay with. So
that makes me think about how I was always so impressed that, like when we would go to Denver, that there was always snow on the mountains
yeah,
and being told like it never melts. And going up into the mountains a bit, and of course, there's always like little streams and things running down the mountains, and I remember like playing in snow along these streams, and it's over summer, but the water's ice cold and there's snow and just that
my
whole
favorite
like,
part.
yeah, it's always there. And that just always blew my little mind that like the snow doesn't melt.
It's was a favorite place. Like my mom's cousin was there. We'd go there, um, just to be in the mountains. And it's still like
Mhm.
if you said meet me at the airport, we're going to Colorado or we're going to Seattle or to Oregon, I would pack up and be on my way. Those are my favorite places to be. The mountains are my favorite. We'd go to Denver. She would take us up into the mountains once or, at least once on every trip. We'd go actually up
Mhm.
and do stuff. Mm. Last time I was in Colorado, we drove up, my friend and I drove up to Estes Park and
Oh,
saw
yes.
the Stanley Hotel, right?
Yep.
That was completely disappointing. I mean, the mountains were not disappointing, but I didn't care about that stuff. The mountains are fantastic. I would go back in a
Yes.
heartbeat. I mean, every time my T and I have been to Denver and we've driven back east towards the flatlands, we're like, he doesn't care as much as I care about. I'm like watching in the rearview mirror going, I don't want to leave. Like I like those places,
I
but
did too. And
we drove. Did you ever fly anywhere? I think you said you didn't fly until your sophomore, right? So you guys drove everywhere for vacations too.
we drove everywhere for vacations. When I did fly, when I flew that first time, the my high school band, we played at we marched in the Cherry Blossom Festival Parade in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And so that's how I ended up on a plane the first time. That was also the first time I'd ever taken public transport, all those wonderful things. And then the next time I flew was when I was flying to London by myself 4 years later.
That's a different conversation.
That was a different, that was a totally different experience. Um, but yeah, otherwise, everything was by car. I took the train once to Illinois, actually to Chicago,
Yeah.
and then we changed trains in Chicago. Well, I mean, my mom would have called it a vacation because she was like, "Hey, we're out of town, so let's have fun." Um, and we did, but I took the train to visit a college in Illinois, in rural Illinois, because I was a finalist for a scholarship there. And
Is that
so,
is that the one in Eureka?
yeah, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So we took the train to Chicago
You know,
and
interestingly, I've never been on a train in this country.
really,
I've been on a
ye-
train in Europe, but I've never been on a train in the United States to
I went
anywhere.
on, I have been on a train, I think, in every country I've ever been to.
We
Yeah,
took the
I'm just,
train. I remember when we went to London. I think we were in London. I was in London about the same time you were in London, weirdly enough. Not, I was only there for a week. It was my first semester. But we took the train, my cousin and I took the train from London to Paris and then
really,
back. So we were on spring break and wait. That's the only train I've never taken Amtrak anywhere here. My
well,
parents,
it was Amtrak we took to Chicago.
yeah,
Um, and then of course the very first thing my family in tall buildings, I swear to God. She'd go to Chicago. First thing we do is we have to go up. At that time it was called the Sears Tower. Um, because mom no.
I
And my
still call it the
mom
Sears Tower and I
and
get dirty looks.
my mom, she drank a whole bunch of water before we went up so she could pee on the top floor.
On the top, that was her deal.
That was her deal. She wanted to say that she had peed on the top floor of the Sears Tower. Like, that was her goal in life.
See,
And
like I would have
then
been the opposite. Like I need to not go and like I don't want to be riding up and
my,
down.
my husband did the same thing. Well, I mean, he didn't pee in the Empire State Building, but the first time my husband and I went to New York, he was like, "We're going to the Empire State Building, and that's it." And it's like, what is it with or people in my family or like in DC? Oh, let's go up to Washington Monument. No, let's not. But yet I'm perfectly fine
With my feet
standing
on the ground.
outside the building, looking.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna pee on the ground. Like
Yeah.
I pee at the ground level.
I mean,
Because
do you think it's maybe the novelty because we all grew up in places there were no actual cities? We didn't have
well,
big buildings.
I think that, and I think part of it too is, mm, especially growing up like in rural Kansas. What do people know about Chicago? Al Capone, the Bears, and the Sears Tower.
Yeah.
Oh, but mom was also like super thrilled when we saw, is it Buckingham Fountain? The
Yep.
fountain that was, at the
Yeah.
beginning of Married with Children. She
It
loved
is.
that because we took a bus tour
I
and she
haven't thought of
thought,
that show in a long time.
she thought that was like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, you have to remember, remember last time I went to see you and we went downtown and we went into the whatever the buildings were, and I'm like, "Oh my God, Blues Brothers was filmed here." And I'm
Yeah.
like walking around, going, "I think this was the floor. This looks, yeah." It's like, yeah,
Yeah. It was weird because my brother was sort of not a fan of heights. And that sounds a little weird because he's a pilot, but I think when he's in control of the machine, he's fine. He just doesn't like tall buildings so much. We didn't go up a lot of tall buildings. So like the first time I came to Chicago was actually when I was an undergrad. We had a conference here. And so at the time, my friend and I stayed with her parents in Milwaukee and
Mhm.
drove down for the conference because we both had to be at the conference. It was a theology conference at the University of Chicago.
Mhm.
And she's like, we're just going to finish the conference and we're just going to go have fun in Chicago. And I was like, okay. I'd never been here, but we made sure we went up to the top. I was like, I don't need to do this ever again. I've never been to the top of the Sears Tower since. And I know it's the Willis Tower. People are going to get mad at me. That's fine. You can put it in the comments. I will accept it. But in my head, it's always the Sears Tower. And now they've
Yes.
renamed the other one. The Hancock building is no longer the Hancock building.
No, it's always going to be the Hancock Building. I
It will
think,
be.
though, in thinking about taking the train to Chicago and tying into always, um, visiting family, always driving. When I went to Washington, D.C. with the high school band,
Yeah.
everything was scheduled and set up and da, da, da. So let me tell you about the story of when my mom and I took the train to Chicago. We ended up there during rush hour, which was exciting. And so we had to change trains.
Yes.
And because neither one of us really knew any better, and we had never been in like the city, my mom had the tickets. She was carrying the tickets on her person, and I was carrying bags. And we get on the train and we get separated. And I can't find my mom. I'm looking for my mom.
Yeah.
And here is an employee. I don't know what you want me to call him. I'll call him asshole because that's what he was.
Yeah.
Approaches me, and it's like during rush hour, and I don't know. We don't know what car we're supposed to be in. Now mom's in another car. I'm 18. I weigh 120 pounds. I'm 5'2". And I was such a cute little thing at the time. Just teeny tiny little girl. Anyway, so this guy comes up. He wants my ticket. And I go, because, a little innocent farm girl here. I'm like, well, my mom has my ticket. Where's your mom? She's over there. He grabbed me by the arm and drug me off the train.
Seriously?
Seriously, he did. And I am just starting to cry and I'm yelling at him and I'm all upset. I'm carrying like 3 bags and, and I keep saying like, my mom's on the train. She's going to leave without me. She's going to miss me. She has the tickets. This is my mom's name. Find my mom. So anyway, he keeps dragging me down the platform. And you know what I did? Other than yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs and making a scene,
Yeah.
is I fought him and I got away and I took off running in the opposite direction, which was then just even farther down the platform. And the only thing I could think of is grab the first person I see in uniform. So I run up to this really tall guy and I grab onto him and I'm holding onto him. And I'm like, please, sir, you have to help me. You have to help me, this man behind me. And the guy behind me, he comes up, he starts pulling on me. So I have my arms like wrapped around this one man. This guy's like literally pulling me. And I'm hysterical because never been to Chicago before, never been on a train. I'm 18. I don't know anybody in Chicago. Da, 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 da. And the tall guy, the tall big guy, he looks down at me and he goes, we're not going anywhere until I say we do because I'm the conductor.
Oh.
And of course, I mean, and it's looking really good. Young, hysterical girl running. I was wearing
Yeah.
heels even because
Oh,
I was all dressed up because we were meeting the college reps at the next station. And, and then one of his employees like pulling on my arm. So anyway, so In the meantime, my mom is looking for me.
It,
She's hysterical. Where's my daughter? Where's my daughter? Things start getting sorted out. And then the conductor realizes, oh, okay, this woman who's thrown a fit in car 6 is the the young lady
who is
drove
latched on
on.
to me.
It's like she's talking to me. I go on the train platform. And so the conductor actually escorted me onto the train and apologized to my mother. And my mother, she went like all mother bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, of course, I was upset and crying and here to explain what had happened. And she was like, how dare anybody touch my daughter and blah, blah, blah. Best part was, guess who was our steward in the car for the next 2 hours?
The guy who grabbed you?
The guy
Oh
and
my
my
God.
and my mother made him pay the
I
whole
bet
time.
she did.
She was the pettiest, meanest woman ever. And so ever since then, when anybody goes, well, here, hold on to my ticket, or you hold on to, no, everybody holds on to their own ticket. Everybody holds on to their own ID.
That makes
So,
sense.
so I was in Chicago for like 2 hours, went to the Sears Tower, got kicked off the train, almost became homeless. Because here was the closest thing I had to any kind of connection in Chicago at that time. My grandma was like, I think your cousin Mayball's husband, Phil, and they now live in Alabama and have for 30 years. I think he grew up in Chicago, so he might still have some family there. So I guess, we could have called somebody. So getting the whole family connection.
Right. Right. You're stranded. I mean, it's completely not the same, but somewhat similar. I remember when I was flying from Omaha in undergrad to, I was flying to Boston because I was thinking of transferring. And so I went to Boston. I had interviews at Boston College and Boston University, uh, and Tufts or whatever. I think it's Tufts there. I forget where Tufts and Tulane's in Louisiana, maybe, or Mississippi or something. That's how long ago this was. My brain is smushed. But was on my way to Boston, and of course it was one of those lovely, like, oh, your flight's delayed, whatever's happening, right? So we were in Detroit. Somehow we ended up in Detroit. Oh, I remember we flew all the way to Boston. The weather was so bad on the East Coast, we couldn't land in Boston. So after making a circle over the freaking Atlantic Ocean for 2 hours, they sent us back to Detroit. We came out of Minneapolis. So like Detroit, they could have sent us somewhere else, but they sent us back to Detroit. My mom has family in Detroit. And as soon as it was so late when we got there, but by the time they were able to get us back on another flight, I had to stay in Detroit for a day. And so my mom was like, just call Henry and Dorothy or whatever, right? Like call my cousins. So I did because I didn't know what else to do. And they came in, their daughter came and picked me up, and I spent the day with them because I didn't have anywhere else to be. And I had no luggage. They wouldn't give us our luggage. They got us off the plane, said, you're all going to come back here at 6:00 in the morning and you're take this plane back to Boston. Well, that didn't happen. They canceled that flight. They sent that plane with our luggage just as a side note to Anchorage. So,
Oh, jeez.
by the time I was 24 hours, a good 24 hours late getting to Boston. Got to Boston, thought my luggage would be in Boston. My luggage was not there. That's when I found out it was in Anchorage. And my cousin met me, took me back to his frat house because I stayed with him in the frat house for the whole week. I had to go buy clothes for my interviews because I didn't have any luggage. My freaking bags showed up on a taxi 20 minutes before I had to get on another taxi to go back to the airport to go back to Omaha. That was my time. But everywhere I end up, there is family. Until I became an adult, outside of college adult, and then started going on my own vacations where now I don't always know people where I go. But growing up, it was always family, family, family. You knew where family was. You called them in advance. You made it set up. You know, we planned everything that way. And I never really thought we were deprived necessarily. I mean, I look at the way people travel now and they go to all these fancy places or they do all these big trips or whatever. And I don't know if that's just the difference in economies, but I don't think at the time we were necessarily deprived. I think we were mostly just enjoying the fact that we were not stuck in the tiny little towns we were almost always in.
And as my mother always said, the vacation starts as soon as we get in the car. I am thinking this is going to have to be a two-parter because as we're talking, I'm thinking of so many other vacation mishaps that
Last
happened.
century vacations part 2 then.
Part two.
That'll work.
And actually, I mean, this is sad, but they're all still last century. So,
Yeah, I know.
yeah,
Mostly because we were still in college until this century started. So they almost have to be last century, right?
yeah, that's true. And I haven't even started my college stories.
Oh, God.
Just to my senior year. Yeah.
Vacations.
So next time, we're going to end on a cliffhanger when T almost got stranded in Amsterdam.
A did get stranded in Amsterdam. I'd forgotten about that. That's going to be fun. I don't know if anybody's going to care, but we're going to talk about it.
Maybe we should just do a whole episode on Amsterdam because that was another place. I saw all kinds of things.
I've never seen again.
Well, I've seen most of them again, but it was a very eye-opening experience. That very first time. So
Definitely for us to talk about Amsterdam. So I guess having said that, we'll just go ahead and close out then.
yeah.
So for our listeners, I mean, this was part 1. Obviously, we're going to talk about Amsterdam for part 2, and other fun things that we can remember from our last century vacations. But please, in the comments, let us know about your last century vacations. Tell us some fun stories. If you can identify with the things we've been talking about, like the constantly staying with family, being crammed into tiny little vehicle, driven across the country, all that fun stuff, we'd love to hear about your stories. Definitely make sure to like and share with your friends, subscribe if you can. And as always, check back with us next week for something else to complain about. But of course, also part 2 with the Amsterdam stories.
And I do have some questions for our viewers. The first one is, did any of your parents take you to a Grateful Dead concert?
It's a good question.
Either on purpose or inadvertently. And then also, did anybody else's dad race trains?
Mine did not, but I'm curious if anybody else's did. I'm sure somebody else's dad did.
Just my parents? Great. Yeah. So, yes, join us again for Last Century Vacations Part 2. Oh my gosh.
Here we
There we go.
Well, it has been fantastic reminiscing. I look forward. Just so our listeners know, I have absolutely no idea what her Amsterdam story is, and I don't think she knows my Amsterdam story. So we're both in suspense, which means your suspense is also our suspense. So we're just going to leave it at that. And next time we're all going to find out what happened together.
Ooh, now we are like a radio mystery hour.
Something like that.
Ooh, cool. All right, everybody.
Until next time, everybody, take care, and we will see you again soon.
Be good.
Whatever.